Our dear Heavenly Father, we come before you with thankfulness, with a heart full of gratitude for the peace and the prosperity and the freedom that we have in this country. This morning, Lord, we want to remember Myanmar. Oh Lord, we want to commit the country into your hand, particularly, Lord, our brethren who are now living in turmoil. And Lord, we pray for peace in the country. We pray for protection of our brethren. Oh Lord, we pray that the elected government and the military will come together to negotiate for the sake of the future of Myanmar. We pray, Lord, you will touch the hearts of all the soldiers who had and who will also do the same by opening fire on the protester. That Lord, you will open their heart and their conscience. That Lord, they will not and they will refrain from firing, live firing that killed their own countrymen. And Lord, we also pray for the churches, for the safety of the church members, the safety of all those that are trusted in you, that you will give them peace. So Lord, we commit Myanmar into your hand and pray for peace. And help us to pray for our brethren there. And we commit all things into your hand. Lord, this morning we also want to commit our sharing together in this manner into your hand. Commit the entire session, Lord, in your hand, that you will lead and guide. We want to thank you and pray and give praise to you, and all this in Jesus' name. Amen. So last week we stopped at this portion on the calculation, the growth rate, and DP from Adam to Jesus. So all the generation, I'm reading Matthew 1:17. So all the generation from Abraham to David are 14 generation. And from David until the carrying away into Babylon are 14 generation. And from the carrying away into Babylon unto Christ are 14 generation. Now, Adam to Noah, we were told that it was 10 generation in Genesis 5. And then in Genesis 11, from Noah to Abraham was 10 generation. So Matthew tells us that the genealogy started from Abraham to Jesus was 42 generation. So in total, we have 62 generation from Adam to Jesus. And then in Luke chapter 3, 23 to 38, we are told that there are 77 names. And therefore, we assume that there are 77 generations. So if we were to take the GI at the 50 years, if we take 62 generation multiplied by 50, we will get 3,100 years. Of course, this is clearly short of 4,000 years that we expected. So actually, Matthew genealogy traces the ancestor of Joseph, and Matthew record 42 generation from Abraham to Jesus, and had intentionally listed 3 sets of 14 generation. Its entire idea is to mark the important historical point in the history of Israel. So he has left out many names like Jehoiakim that the Bible has recorded. Now, Matthew's main intention was to prove that Jesus was the direct descendant of both Abraham and David and had the legitimate right to be the Messiah as prophesied in the OT. So we now choose one article from Conforming to Jesus to illustrate our point. And what he did basically is that he compared Matthew 1:17 and Luke 3:23 to 38. So if you look at Luke itself, it starts from God, and then you went down to Adam, to Seth, and all the way to Tara. And then both part of the scriptures talk about Abraham all the way to David. And down the road, you see that we have Solomon, Rehoboam, and all the way to Jeconiah. But in the book of Luke, instead of Solomon, you notice that Nathan was mentioned. And also they use a different name instead of Jeconiah to Neri. And then we come to the last portion, the next 14. And the last one basically down to the father of Joseph and Jesus. Now this is another chart that I took that show the age of the individual forefathers, the patriarch. And you can see here that they are listing only the first 20. Now Adam started with 0 years and he lived 930 years. Okay, I draw your attention to one interesting thing, that is the number of generations that are alive during Adam. So if you look at the chart itself, you see that Seth was between the active generation that are alive, and then you have Enos, and you have Canaan, and then you have Mahalalel, who is also alive during the days of Adam. And then you have Jerah, Enoch, and Methuselah. And I think also Lamech. Okay. And of course, Noah was born after Adam. So we have actually, including Adam, we have actually 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So there are 8 generations that were alive during the days of Adam. Please take note of that, because later on we will look at this in another section. And also, if you look at the number of years, Adam started with 0, and then we have the significant years of 1056 here, where Noah was born, and down to 2008, where Abraham was born after Adam was born. And this gives us a number of years how we can trace the genealogy of Abraham. But from past discussion, you realize that some of these data may be a little bit different from academia researcher or theologian, and that is something that we should take note of. Okay, so the significant years actually Noah, and then we look at the day of Adam. Now the estimate age of mankind, the Bible gives us the years from, if we look at Genesis and 15, and from the table itself, Adam to Noah's is 1,556 years, and then the flood Noah entered the ark 600 years after he was born, right? So it's 1656, the years after Adam. And Noah died in the year 2006. Now from Adam to Abraham, we know that it's 2008. So Matthew wants to, if you look at Matthew chapter 1:17, the whole generation from Abraham to David generation, and from David to the deportation to Babylon was 14th generation. And then from Babylon to Messiah is 14th generation. Now, if we assume from the past discussion that we have an average of approximately 50 years per generation, then 42 generation will give us about 2,100 years. Therefore, from Adam to Jesus, if we add where we are today, it will be 4,108 years. From Adam to Jesus is 4,108 years. And today, while we are discussing this, we find that the number of years from Adam is 628 years. So this shows us that the earth is a young earth. It is only about 6,000 years. So this one discussion that Burke Lawwood has done, and the internet location below if you're going to look at it. Next, we look at James Ussher. Now, the following is a summary of important dates found in James Ussher's Annals of the World. It was revised and updated in 2003. Now, Ussher represents one of the best scholarship of his time, and he was part of a substantial research tradition, a community of intellectuals working together with a common goal under an accepted methodology. That means they agree on a certain way of looking at the dates. And if you go to Ussher's Annals, he believed that the earth is 404 years from Adam to Christ. And you have seen this before. So we look at the important date itself. Adam was born, the earth was created 4,004th year, and Adam was created 6 days later. And then we have a date of when Adam died, and we have 2948. If you compare this date to the date that we have seen before, there are certain differences. And then 600 years later, Noah entered into the ark with the family members. And then we have a date 1996 BC where Abraham was born, and he was 75 when his father Terah died at the age of 205. Then the important date again is when Israel was born, 1836, where Jacob was born, and then when Jacob died, 1689. Okay. So Ussher, he was the Archbishop of Armagh and the primate of all Ireland. He proposed a date which differ a little bit from other biblical-based estimates, such as some of the experts of his time and subsequent. If you can look at it, it's Joseph ben Halafta, Yabide, You have Asher near contemporary Schrödinger, and you have Johannes Kepler, and of course Isaac Newton, who give a date of about 4,000 years. For any one of us who are really interested to look at it, this will be the good material to do a research and to establish the difficulty on how they come to the exact date. Now, this session is very easy to calculate using the chronology data in Genesis 5 to 11. This portion of it is very, very clear, which gives us an unbroken male lineage with a number of years from creation of Adam to Abraham being called out of Ur of the Chaldean. Now, Asher fixed this period as 2082 from 4004 to 1922 itself. Asher wrote that the time from Abraham leaving Haran to Exodus was 430 years. I think the previous speaker has discussed substantially on this. Based on Abraham's descendants suffering a period of 400 years of persecution, commencing 30 years after Abraham left Haran. Now, 1 Kings 6, if you recall, said that 480 years elapsed from the Exodus to the beginning of the construction of Solomon's temple in the 4th year of the reign of Solomon. Therefore, the temple foundation was laid 910 years after Abraham left Haran. And this 910 years span between 1922 to 1012 estimate. Again, all the dates are based on Asher. And he said the period of the temple led to Babylon captivity. This period is the most difficult to calculate due to the repeated difficulties in correlating the regnant years of the kingdom of Judah and Israel. Now, simple addition of the reign of Judah's king result in a total of 430 years. But by positing a few overlapping reign, Asher shortened this to 424 years. In other words, 1012 to 588. Okay. So here, from Asher's article, we can realize that the most difficult part of it is looking at the kingdom of Judah and the kingdom of Israel, and the number of kings and their reign and the number of years that they reign. Those pose a certain difficulty in getting the actual year to arrive at the Adam to Jesus. Now, after reckoning the years from creation to the last king of Judah, Asher used 2 Kings 25:27 to establish the length of time from the creation to the accession of Babylonian king Emil Marduk, and he is also known as the evil Merodach. He then used information from the Babylonian, Greek, and Roman sources to fix the date of Emil Marduk, enthronement at 562 BC, after Nebuchadnezzar's death, from which he was able to deduce a creation in 4004. Here, basically, it says that apart from depending on the biblical text and data, Asher also used external data, historical data, to come at a certain date itself. So this is another estimate by Bishop James Asher, who claimed that from the day of creation of the earth and Adam to Jesus is 404 years. Next, we want to look at certain mathematical formula. Now, this part is the most difficult because I'm not a mathematician, but I've taken certain model to take a look at how we can arrive at the young Earth with certain articles that have been written by expert here. So first we look at Henry M. Morris. He said that assuming that human population increased dramatically, the increase each year is equal to a constant proportion of the population of the previous year. Now this is his assumption. Then this relationship can be expressed in mathematically as Pn equal to P, the population at that time, bracket 1 plus R close time N, in which P is the population at any certain time, R is the proportional annual increase in population, and Pn is then the result of the population in the number of years, n years later. So if we take a certain model, a simple model since the day of creation to Noah, okay, or Noah to now. So we are using two examples. Now, if Pn is the total population today, today we have 7.54 billion people, and P equal to Adam plus Eve. So we have the 2%, okay, and then N we assume so I make a mistake here. So if we are talking to Adam up to now, it should be 6,000 years instead of 4,000 years. My apology. So if we plug in the figure of 7.54 billion equal to 2, where P is 2, the number of people in the beginning, and then with 1 plus R, multiply them by 6,000, we will get a figure of 0.00. The figure will not be very far away from this figure, okay, despite the fact it's 2,000 years different. We can see that actually R, which is the rate of population growth, is very, very small compared to the 2% growth estimated by scientists. Now the 2%, as you can see, if you remember the previous notes, if you look at population growth, they're about 1.1% and so forth, that arrive at 2%. And society using 2% seems to be quite reasonable. But during a period of the creation of Adam until today, we do not have or record the number of severe deaths that can bring that population back to what we are today. So R is a very small figure. Now, if we were then choose the example of Noah, now if P equal to 8, then using the same calculation, you can see that actually in the day of Noah, there are only 8 persons. And from Noah until today, we have a figure of actually a very small figure. Okay, a very, very small figure. And if you compare this to Adam, is less than 1%. So we conclude that evolutionarily estimate that man is about 200,000 to 300,000 years where the first Homo sapien is formed. We can see that actually the date itself are very, very far stretched. It cannot be true that the man has a form of 200,000 to 300,000 years. In fact, if you look at it, man is about 6,000 plus and minus years. Next, we look at Lambert dolphin. And Lambert Dolphin article is actually found here. If you are looking at the screen, the website is here. If we and he give a very detailed calculation, and I want to share with you one of the very simple one here. Now this is the growth of the world population during various epochs of Earth history, and it can be calculated by this particular formula here. So Lambert uses this formula. Pn equal to 2 bracket C n minus x plus 1 multiplied by C power x minus 1. Cx minus 1 bracket and divided by C minus 1. Okay. Where n is the generation and the 2C refer to the children. How many children? And they use word 2C. So C will then be half of the children of a particular generation. Then there's a variable called x, and x is the average number of generation that is alive. You remember when we look at Adam, 7 generations were alive during his lifetime, so x will be 7. But in general, you find that x is much smaller now because men do not live that long today. So Pn is the population after n generation, beginning with 1 man and 1 woman. And then n is the number of generation. And this is found by dividing the total time period by the numbers of years per generation. Okay. And then the variable x can be thought of as the number of generation they are alive when Pn is calculated. And C is half the number of children in the family. This is a bit mathematical, and but this is still okay. This I think is a straightforward formula. We can look at it. We can look at it. Now we take Israel for example, and this one we can argue over it. We don't need to do a calculation. The population of Israel when they enter into Egypt, Exodus 1:15 tells us they are 70. And this one we have discussed this before. The 7th generation of Jacob, the children and the grandchildren, they come out to a figure of 70 that enter into Egypt. And the author actually says that they stay 400 years in Egypt, and the Bible recorded that the population equal to about 2,600,000 able men, found in number 2651. But from our previous discussion, it was pointed out that the actual stay of Israel in Egypt is about 270 years instead of 400, because 400 started from I think in this case was the day of Isaac. And we do assumption. Now, assuming 1 generation is 40 years, with 1 couple, therefore it took about 10 generations. If you use 400 divided by 40, then of course we got 10 generations, which author claim. You need only 10 generations, or 10 generations itself to produce 2 million Hebrews. Okay, they are not called Jews at that time, Hebrews. But if we were to use 270, then I get about 6.75 generation. Assuming that 1 generation is 40 years. Now let's take a look at what evolutionists say. Evolutionists basically claim that the Earth is X number of million years ago. Okay. And we want to show that this is almost impossible. Almost impossible. Okay. So one of the claims is that the Earth was created, or the Earth was formed with a Big Bang a few million years ago. And at the same time, they say that that man came from ape, and we only come to a human form, so-called Homo sapien, about 200,000 to 300,000 years ago. Now let's do a calculation here. If the Earth is 1 million years, and this is really a very pure calculation, and this is what author says. This is what author say. The author say that in 1 million years, if n equal to 23256, this is the quoted from the article. I was wondering why he used 23256, because if you use 1 million divided by 40 years to be consistent from his discussion, then we got 25,000 generation, which is probably more straightforward. But either case is the example. And C equal to 1.25. That means each family has about 3 children. And then we have X. X represent the generation they are alive. So 3 generations seems to be quite reasonable today. A business run after 3 generations will have the critical situation or whether they will survive or not survive. So X equal to 3. Then if we plug this figure all into this formula, we will come up with a figure 3.7 times 10 to the power of 2091 person. Okay. And if I were to use recalculate, which I did not, if I were to calculate, let's say I'm using in 200,000 years instead of 1 million years, because scientists claim that the Homo sapien came about in a real human form about 200,000 years ago. If I put that figure, then I will come up also with a figure that is quite astronomical. And we should note that, so this is the figure that seems pretty huge. So the total surface area of the Earth, if we do the calculation, is only 5 times 10 to the power of 14 square meters. If everybody stand on 1 square meter, so we will have a population of 5 times 10 to the power of 14. Beyond that, the Earth will be filled, including the river, the mountain, everywhere will be filled up with people. So if you compare this figure Pn and compare to the area that we are standing, we will then definitely be over flooded. Somebody got to live on the sky, and the houses got to build above the atmosphere in order to accommodate that number of people here. Okay. Therefore, in 1 million years, if the population of the Earth is 10 to the power of 2091, the Earth will be overcrowded. Now, from this argument, the author is trying to say that the Darwin assumption and the evolutionists cannot be correct. They cannot be correct. In other words, the Earth is a young Earth, and mathematically we can prove that the Earth is young, and today our population is about 7 billion, compared to what the evolutionary theory is trying to point us to. In other words, if Darwin and the scientists are all correct, today we don't have a place for car to travel. We cannot even use the bicycle because everywhere is filled with people. Now this is a quotation that I took from the paper. In the very beginning of the paper, the author of the paper has cited Darwin and also another evolutionists are called Linnaeus. Now let me read to you what Darwin say. Darwin basically said that the multiplication of the animal and the vegetable kingdom is in a geometrical power. That means it's very, very fast. And actually he gave a figure of 25 years, which is pretty interesting. Let me read to you. Now Darwin cited the high geometrical power of increase applied to the whole animal and vegetable kingdom. Now, please take note of this because this is the key point. This is really their theory on why the Earth is a few million years ago. And he continued to say, interestingly, there is no exception to the rule that every organic being naturally increases at so high a rate that if not destroyed, the Earth will soon be covered by the progeny of a single pair. Okay, from one pair, the Earth will then be overwhelmed. Even slow breeding man has doubled in 25 years. And at this rate, in a few thousand years, there would literally not be a standing room for this progeny. And this is very interesting to look at Darwin's claim. And we have actually proven 25 years is probably half of what actually happened. So Darwin actually erred in this claim that man will double in 25 years. Now another gentleman, Linnaeus, he has calculated that if the annual plant produce only two seeds, of course we know that plant will produce more seed, but he just say that if the plant produce two seeds, and the next year the seedling will produce two, and so on. And he claimed in 25 years there will be 1 million plants. And again he claimed the example of elephant. Now elephant is reckoned to be the slowest breeder of all mammals. And he said, I have taken some pain to estimate its probable minimum rate of natural increase. And it will be under the mark to assume that it breeds when 30 years old and go on breeding to 90 years old, bringing forth 3 pair of young in this interval. If this is so, at the end of the 5th century, so you bring forth 3 pair of an interval, and if it is so, at the end of the 5th century, there will be alive 15 million elephant descendant from the first. This is a very interesting remark quoted here, and we want to take a look at this. So I make a conclusion here. Darwin and evolutionists claim that the Earth will be overpopulated to the natural rapid growth. Now let's think a bit, okay? In the day of Darwin, if Darwin is alive, and if he was thinking about this theory, he would then face with a real problem as he see things around the world. Number one, from what Darwin say, the world at that time would have already been overly populated. In other words, in his eye, he will see, if his theory is correct, what is happening, right? And yet, he did not come to that point. Now, so I conclude here that Darwin cited the high geometrical power increase applied to the whole animal and the vegetables kingdom. I even say that even slow breeding man will double in 25 years. And in a few thousand years, literally there'll be no place for this generation itself. And again, I remind you on Linnaeus, he has calculated if the annual plant produce 2 seeds and so forth, we will have 1 million plants. So here I say, on one hand, evolutionary claim that rapid geometrical growth rate of animals, vegetation, and even human being. On the other hand, they claim that the Earth is a few million years, 150 million years or few hundred million years, and the Homo sapien formed 200 to 300,000 years. Now, Darwin could have realized that his observation of the world as his time when he was alive was grossly against his theory. Now, if he was true, the Earth must have been grossly populated at his time. Yet, as we observe today, the population of the Earth is about 7.54 billion in the today while we are still talking. So this can prove, and if Darwin's theory is correct, then today we really have no space to move. Now this is another model, max model, for those who are interested in looking at population growth to mathematical formula. This is another one by two gentlemen, Robert Carter and Chris Hardy, and he wrote this article on the Journal of Creation in May 2015. The website is given below. We are not going to discuss this because we have already used two mathematical examples. But if you are interested, please go to the website and take a look. So I got to make a conclusion. And my conclusion is based on Henry Madison Morris. He said this. He said basically the way how scientists work, they work on models, certain mathematical models, certain appropriate and close to real ideal model, and try to evaluate each proposed model of a particular process in terms of the degree of fit of the known data into the model they're looking at. Now, on this basis, we are abundantly justified in concluding, he said, that the creationist model with its brief chronology fit the actual known data of population statistic far better than the million-year evolutionary model. In terms of scientifically accepted standard of evaluation, this can only mean that on this issue at least, creationism is much more scientific than evolutionism. Now, what Henry trying to say here is basically that scientists will observe the current data, the real data, and in order to match them with the theory, they will come out with a certain mathematical model and try to put the data into the model to prove their point. And some of this model, as we can see, that scientists are using will be way out of point. If you look at the mathematical formula that we use itself, it's very, very impossible. And some of the model that are being used by scientists can be proven wrong. So I conclude here. And my conclusion is that if you look at the Bible data, and it's just what Usher had done also, taking the historical data from historical record, he is able to combine both biblical data as well as secular data to prove that the Earth today is about 6,000 years and not much more than this. Okay. So from the population statistic aspect, we examine the world population. Number one, we examine the census of Israel. That means the population of Jacob. And then the years from Adam to Jesus. From the data itself, we can confidently conclude that the biblical data of the earth and mankind and we can prove that these are actually quite young. Young in the sense of a relative comparison to what evolutionary claim. Evolutionary claim that the Earth is a few million years, but we from the biblical data as well as secular data, creationists are able to deduce that the Earth is actually about 6,000 years plus and minus, and mankind is created 6 days after the Earth. So the lifespan of mankind from Adam to what we are today is about 6,000 over years itself. Now, just to recall, in studying this topic itself, there are certain important terminology that we use. We have DP, a dual population. We have GI, generation interval. And these are always been used if you study population growth. These are common terminology that are used. And we can also see that the Bible itself gives us enough data for us to conclude, plus and minus, that the Earth is a young Earth. Now, remember, Usher actually claimed that the most difficult part of his calculation and coming out with the book, The Annals of the World, is the year of the kingdom of Judah and Israel. Now, after the death of Solomon, the kingdom was split into two, and from there, the book of Kings, the book of Chronicle record the number of kings and their lifespan. From it itself, many of the data are missing, especially in terms of the years of reign and the life of the king during those years. We have the good king, we have the bad king, but not all their lifespan are recorded. Therefore, it makes us difficult to know exactly the number of years between that period itself. Looking at this chapter is very interesting because when years ago, we always remember 586, 516. Everybody remember, right? The destruction of the second temple and the restoration of the seventh temple. And Daniel tells us it's 70 years. So we always remember this date when we study the Bible. 586, the destruction, Nebuchadnezzar came in, destroyed Jerusalem, destroyed the temple, took everything away from the temple and moved them to Babylon, including captive to Babylon. And 70 years later, the temple was restored. Zerubbabel, Ezra, and then you have Nehemiah, the three of them that restore the temple. And Ezra was the one that bring back the worship of Yahweh into Israel. But then when we go through this paper, it's very interesting as you look at how historians and those who are spending their whole life in looking at the history and the dates, like James Usher, we realize that things are not that simple. But however, we believe that the Bible is true, that the earth is a young earth. So for this, I want to thank you very much for your patience, and maybe we can open up for some question.
Hello, Bei Pong.
Go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, this is Vincent here. It's a very, very interesting presentation you have given. Thank you for that. But just want to check with you. You mentioned towards the end that Darwin would have known during his time that the world would have been overpopulated based on his theories and so on. But yet, that study called evolution still exists. Why is that so? Why do you think that if it sort of contradicts his theory, why would he still still have that branch of study.
Of course, that is my question to him.
Yeah,
uh,
still
uh,
alive.
so Darwin, basically how historically how he become a evolutionist, right? He went to biology. He looked at all the animal vertebrae, and he go very deep into it, and he came out with this theory of evolution itself. Uh, so when the evolutionists talk about the Earth is so many years, and man came from ape, and then ape, from the ape we form into a man structure, right?
Yes.
And that's where, according to evolution, that's where man started.
Yeah.
And from most data that we quoted from the article itself, they basically say that the Homo sapien come about 200,000, 300,000 years ago. Okay. So if we take basically 200,000 years, which we have proved, and multiply by the growth, even if we use 25 years or 50 years, the Earth could have already been overpopulated.
Exactly. That's
Yeah. So these are, of course, after so many years of argument, our creationists has started arguing why evolutionary cannot stand, and today we have the benefit of those information, right? Um, how to rebut the evolutionists and to prove that they are not. I mean, it's not logical because based on Max itself, if man is formed or man is created 200,000 years ago, if you use Max itself, we could not be 7.1 billion. Or between the period, just like Noah's case, the whole earth is destroyed, and then man start again. But from the Bible, we are told that the flood happened once only, and throughout the history, there was no such occurrence again, whether by fire, earthquake, or tsunami, or whatever cause. They have totally destroyed population of the earth and left one couple. They start again, you know.
Yeah. So I suppose man is so stubborn that even in the face of compelling evidence, and yet he's one who still stick to theories that is against the Bible. I suppose that's the fallacy of man.
One thing you got to realize is that we are, all of us are looking at the Bible as the standard truth. Where else, the men in the world do not believe that.
Yeah, that's right.
Now, how do we arrive at 4,000 years? We are using basically on the truth that we believe from Adam to Christ. And those are data that we have, that we believe, and we use those data, right?
Yeah.
It's unthinkable for scientists to use those data, right? Unless scientists are able to find historically that all the events mentioned in the Bible are able to be substantiated through archaeological finds, right? But having said that, we also realize that many of these data are known to us. For example, the unearthing of a certain site in Jerusalem about the reign of King David, Solomon's temple. The flood, we have plenty of evidence to prove that the flood exists. But yet, secular society may not accept that. So we had from the far away view looking forward, we realize that the worldview that Christians have and the worldview that the world has, they are always in conflict. That's why the Bible tells us that we are not of this world.
Yes, yes, yes. Okay, thank you.
If I can interrupt, Beng Hong, you still have one more week next Sunday, so you can also deal with Q&A. But also on that question, if you read Darwin's On Origins, actually he was very puzzled because of Malthus' data, and he wrote one whole chapter, chapter 3, to talk about this case. That why species will not survive, struggle of existence, and then talk of wars and disease and checks of increase. But after writing and looking at all the data, he still have to admit that there's no exception to the rule of increase now. So what you quoted actually was his dour conclusion, where he had to concede that he cannot solve this. Darwin couldn't solve a lot of problems, which we shall see even when we come to chapter 10 on genetics. He couldn't solve a lot of problems. But yeah, it was good lesson today, Ping Hong. Matthew started actually from Abraham and not from Adam, whereas Luke started from Adam. That's why there are different number of generations.
Yeah.
And Luke, conservative scholars believe Luke is from Mary's lineage or parentage, whereas Matthew is from the Joseph's lineage. Yeah, there are also still challenges here and there that one name was missing, Canaan, um, which was in Genesis but not in the Gospels. But but it's not too serious. So one other area you didn't really cover in depth, Beng Hong, is what we have today that Matthew Henry, no, Henry Morris didn't have, which is DNA. So in DNA, we have the mitochondrial, which is from the mother's side DNA, and maybe we can cover it next week, where going by those DNA, we know that 34 generations ago, 30 generations ago, all the Europeans today can trace back to one common ancestor. And if that was extrapolated to the other races, 34 generations ago, we all have a common mother, 34 generations. So, and that we're looking at, we don't know whether the common mother existed after the flood or before the flood, right? So we have to keep in mind there's always two periods of time from Adam to the time of when Noah was 600 years old and Methuselah died in the year of the flood. And then after the time of the flood until today. So that will give you your 6,100 plus years until today. All right, so over back to you, Beng Hong. Just a small comment from me.
Yeah. So when I look at the DNA portion, uh, actually I'm not confident to present actually, because it's totally out the realm of my understanding. In other words, I got to maybe spend some time reading that through and reading exactly what the basis of DNA and so forth, So when I read through that article itself, at first it doesn't convince me. That's one thing, because I probably lack a lot of data to fill up the gap. Yeah, that's why I left it out. Yeah.
Beng Hong, Mark here. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Yeah. Two questions. Now, in your first slide, you use 50 years for one generation, but subsequently you use 40 years. So just wonder, what is the basis for that figures or to set the years for generation? Because another thing is, if you look at today's context, most people have children around 20 plus, 30 years like that. So I think we should use that interval as generation, as the duration for generation, rather than I mean that's my sense. Yeah, that's question one. Question two is you have a formula just now about Pn equal to P multiplied 1 plus R and so forth and so forth. That formula to calculate population. Now, as I look at that formula, it is a straight line, linear straight line. I have a feeling that the population growth is probably an exponential curve rather than straight line. So I wonder what others argument does people have in that context? Yeah.
So you notice that when the last week before we end, if we look at the population itself, we look at the last portion of it, we realized that the population doubled in 50 years, right? And the author of the article also say that if we divide 70 by 50, that gives us something. So 50 years was used. We find that is in the beginning part of it. We find that it's very, very suitable because 50 years is very reasonable. Now the last article that we quoted, the mathematical side, we quoted 40 years. The 40 years doesn't come from me. The 40 years actually came from the author. And because he has used 40 years, so I actually follow 40 years. Okay, and the reason is because I do not know why he used 40 years. He could have his own reason why he think that based on his study and understanding that 40 years is a reasonable data that he used, you know. So that give rise to the differences of data use. But if I were to use, I will use 50 years. You know.
Can I share a screen? If you look at the world population, the first census actually happened in 1950, a world global census. Before that, the UK started it after Malthus' time, and not many countries had a census of population. But what actually we saw is that population growth was was not so uniform. There were good years and bad years, rapid growth and slow growth. So this can vary that interval time. And of course, in the time of the Jews or Israel, the Israelites in Egypt, they grew very, very fast. Maybe 17 years, they doubled. So this year's actually changes from time to time. And after the World War, with the baby boom and all that, so it's erratic. But whatever way you look, whether you say it's 1%, 0.9%, 2% or whatever, you don't have your trillions of years, right? And we already saw 2 to the power of 40 is 1 trillion. In the computer world, we say 32 bits is 4 gigabyte, 2 to the power of 32. So your old computer can address 4 gigabyte of RAM. 64-bit is mainframe, is endless, 2 to the power of 64. There's no such thing as 100-bit computer. 64 already is too much. So whatever way you look at it, our evolutionist friends are wrong-footed. You know, whether you look at this or that data, and in the olden days they used, you can use Excel, you can just 2 to the power whatever you want, endless numbers. So we don't even need to use log table to calculate these numbers, right? So basically, the evolutionists have no grounds, unfortunately, right? So I just thought to add this point. It's erratic, it's not uniform, but it's still growing no matter how relentlessly, even as Darwin had to admit.
Right. So Mark, your second question on the linear curve, and you are absolutely right. If you look Lambert's article, most of the projection are actually exponential. You go below and then you suddenly go up. So that is exponential. And I just go back to what we discussed last week. So the DP, which we call the doubling period, right? And its definition is that it's the average time for a population to double via exponential growth. So for the simplistic calculation, there are many ways of doing it. One way is we use a linear equation. The other way is to use the exponential equation, you know, Pn equal to 2 and then bracket, you know, the formula itself. Remember the Pn equal to 2 bracket Cn C the power n minus x plus 1 bracket Cx minus 1 divided by C minus 1. So those formula are exponential formula.
Yeah. Maybe what we can conclude is this. If you use a linear straight line, it's already proven or it's already sensible enough to say that 1 million year or 200,000 year is not possible. Then if you apply the exponential curve, all the more Darwinism cannot be true.
I think you are absolutely on the dot lah. On the dot itself lah, you know. We to safely put, actually, if we use 200,000 year, which is the lowest figure that they quote, I think we can easily say that evolutionists are quite out of the truth lah.
This is Ben here. I just wanted to comment that I guess Brother Wing Hong's excellent presentation relative to all the different formulas. But for a person like Ben, who is a very simplistic guy, I just want to offer this perspective about the DP. You know, and I'm just drawing from how I manage my portfolio. There's this thing called the rule of 72. It's just coming from a stupid Benson thing, you know. I certainly don't have the capacity to look at all the formulas and all that, unlike Brother Mark here. But I think just to offer a perspective, using what I thought I did some calculation. If you use the rule of 72, then quite simplistically, whatever the evolutionists are thinking, it doesn't exist, because just based on the rule of 72, if you take the population growth, which is round and about, and I think Brother Singhu mentioned it very aptly. I mean, whether is it 1.1% to 2.1%, if you do that, then quite easily we can actually see that the world population actually doubles once in every maybe 50, depending on whatever numbers you actually enter. So if you use the rule of 72 and plow it back, the world will be probably in the region of about maybe 7,000 years or 6,526 years, whatever the number is. Yeah. So again, it can't be over several millions of years or several hundred millions of years. Yeah. So my calculation is quite simplistic for a stupid Benson like Benson Ng. So yeah, I use the rule of 72 basically.
Yeah. Thanks a lot, Ben. Yeah, good point.
Thanks. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Brother Hong.
Yeah. Thank you. Bye bye.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Thank you, Brother Big.
Bye bye.